OTR-FM, part of the ION radio network. IPMNation.com.
Hey, welcome everybody. Jumping right into it. No big fancy intro tonight. We're just diving right in because just got done watching tonight's Democratic debate in Milwaukee. And, of course, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. It was quite a show. It started off, I thought, kind of subdued compared to previous debates, but forgive me as I adjust my microphone here. Hillary's demeanor was a little less attacking than it had been in the last debate, where she seemed to be pretty much on the offensive. I thought she might go on the offensive tonight, but it started out she was much calmer, but it definitely got fiery later on, and really quite a bit at the end. I think I still think the smart play for her would be to keep it kind of, just try to be above it all, like she was in the very first Democratic debate when it was 5 of them, when it was Hillary and Bernie along with Jim Webb and Martin O'Malley and Lincoln Chafee, and she just kind of seemed like, she was at center stage and just kind of floating above it all, like just, we all know I'm going to be the nominee and this is a formality, but I think she should still play it that way, because she doesn't seem confident when for one thing, when she's just giving the death look to Bernie Sanders the entire night, like she's just kind of glaring at him, like she's thinking, get out of the way, old man. It's my turn to be president. But it definitely we'll look at some of the more interesting moments tonight during the debate. But I think, honestly, first impressions, I think he crushed her. He continues to look like the guy who's not afraid to tell the truth and say things that politicians aren't supposed to say, like talking about, the influence of money in politics and whatnot, because he can. I mean, he's proven that you can run for president credibly with donations from regular people averaging $27, and without having a super PAC and taking special interests and lobbyist money and all that. I mean, he's proven you can do that, and he continues to look like that guy, whereas she continues to look like the establishment candidate who thinks it's her turn to be president. And that really came through tonight, I thought. So we'll get into that and a couple other things as well. Late breaking development, which they did reference during the debate with the agreement in Syria. So there's a lot to cover. But before we get into all that, of course, I'll remind you that we are broadcasting from the Uptown Auto Repair Studio in Manchester, New Hampshire, as Matt Connarton Unleashed does, 5 nights a week on the IPM Nation live station, Station 1, Live 1. Of course, live station powered by Ambit Energy. If you want to learn how to save on your energy bills, very easy. Just go to ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. That's ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. Find out how you can do that, and you can save quite a bit of money. Also, of course, Tuesdays and Thursday nights, we have the honor and privilege of being carried on OTR-FM, the premium channel on the the OMTimes radio network. So wonderful to have you with me. And, of course, I'll remind everybody, if you didn't see it yet, the television edition of this week's Matt Connarton Unleashed is up. I was joined, as I often am, by John Hopwood of Ward 13, and as I am joined occasionally by Peter White of Amsterdam, and the three of us kind of talked about the New Hampshire primary and some other things as well. Took some calls. So that is up and available on YouTube, and we'll have Ward 13 up as well shortly, because that program also was John and Peter and I. So we just basically, the three of us, did 2 hours together talking about politics and other things. And let's see. So the debate, I kind of gave you a quick summation of my thoughts, but we'll look at Politico has an article up, the 7 most important moments of the Democratic debate. And if anyone wants to chime in with your own thoughts, if you saw the debate, or if you want to talk about anything at all, you can. We do have a phone line open for you, 617-917-4IPM. That's IPM as in IPM Nation. 617-917-4IPM or 617-917-4476 if you prefer. You can call or you can text us. We do have the chat room, of course, at ipmnation.com/live1. You can post on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page or tweet me anytime at Matt Connarton. Let's look at this, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So this, again, this is from Politico, 7 most important moments. Number 1, Sanders swings first. When Clinton began describing what she would do as president, particularly on the size of federal government, Sanders moved quickly to interrupt her attempt to present herself as an incumbent because she had said something about, when I'm in the White House, this will happen and whatnot. And he said sharply, quote, Secretary Clinton, you're not in the White House yet, unquote. I thought that was a little overly that seemed like just kind of a cheap as much as I enjoyed Sanders' performance tonight, I thought he did well. That seemed like kind of a cheap thing to say. I don't know. I didn't like that. Let's see. And it says here that it was only the beginning of Sanders' more aggressive approach in this forum, while Clinton aimed over and again to show little ideological distance between herself and her rival. Number 2, children crossing the border. One of the sharpest exchanges of the debate came amid a discussion about the thousands of Central American children that poured over the border in 2014. The issue led to a fierce debate about whether the children should be returned home or allowed to remain in the U.S. Sanders said, quote, I thought it was a good idea to allow those children to stay in this country. That was not, I understand, the secretary's position, unquote. Clinton said she fought to ensure children who arrived here were processed appropriately, but she wanted, quote, to send a message to families and communities, unquote, not to send their children on dangerous journeys to America. Sanders shot back, quote, I don't know to whom you're sending a message. Who are you sending a message to? These are children who are leaving countries and neighborhoods, unquote. That was a good moment for him. He had a lot of good moments tonight. She didn't have very many. Number 3, Sanders sees history in his candidacy, too. This was very interesting. Asked about a bid to potentially stand in the way of the first woman to become president, Sanders argued that his election would be a first of its own. Quote, somebody with my background, somebody with my views, I think a Sanders victory would be of some historical accomplishment as well, unquote. Sanders didn't explain what exactly in his background would be unique. He would be the first Jewish president and the first self-identified socialist. Number 4, I did not expect to hear Henry Kissinger's name uttered tonight. This was a surprise. Kissinger makes a debate cameo. Testing new and more detailed critiques of Clinton's foreign policy cred beyond his familiar hits on her vote to authorize war in Iraq in 2002, Sanders swiped at Clinton for taking advice from Henry Kissinger. Sanders argued that the former Secretary of State was responsible for a disastrous foreign policy that led to the rise of the Khmer, I'm not sure how you say this, Khmer Rouge. Okay, I know what that is. I didn't realize that's how you spelled it. Khmer Rouge and the deaths of millions of people. He was saying that about Kissinger, not Clinton. Quote, I will not take advice from Henry Kissinger, unquote. By the way, that whole exchange was, if I can find audio of that during the break, I'll play it for you. That was a fascinating exchange. And another great moment for Sanders. Number 5, Clinton answers Iraq charge with bin Laden advice. When Sanders uncorked a familiar hit on Clinton for her Iraq war vote, she quickly shot back that she made a far more recent foreign policy judgment with better results. She said, quote, that was a very difficult decision as to whether or not to advise the president to go after bin Laden. I recommended he go forward, unquote. Clinton nicked Sanders for repeatedly citing her Iraq vote. Quote, I do not believe that a vote in 2002 is a plan to defeat ISIS in 2016, unquote. She's pulled that line out before, by the way. It always gets applause. And it's a good line. Number 6, Sanders breaks with Ted Kennedy. In the protracted debate on immigration, Clinton dinged Sanders for opposing Ted Kennedy's comprehensive immigration reform bill. Sanders heaped praise on Kennedy, but said he broke with his ally because it enshrined guest worker programs that Latino advocacy groups said were akin to slavery. I don't apologize for that vote, he said. And he looked strong in saying that. Another good moment for him. Her attack on him did not work. And finally, number 7, Clinton plays to the home crowd. In a critique of Sanders' ambitious and expensive policies proposals, Clinton noted that many would require buy-in from state. And she said, quote, governors like Scott Walker likely wouldn't be playing along, unquote. Oh, she also said, quote, I'm a little skeptical of your governor, unquote. That was kind of a throwaway. No, I thought, look, over and over again in these exchanges, I think he really just came out on top. And I don't know what she can do to overcome that. You know, I mean, and I said on Facebook, look, I mean, I'm never going to be a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm not a socialist. I'm a small government guy. But at the same time, I can't ignore that he does speak the truth on a lot of things. And there are things he says that I do agree with. When he talks about mass incarceration, when he talks about rolling back the drug war, when he talks about demilitarizing the police, and a variety of other things. I mean, I know there's more. I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of stuff where I go, yeah, I mean, he's telling the truth on that. So, and there's one other thing, which we'll hit on when we come back. More Unleashed coming up. Don't go away. We're live. Stay with me.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Come on down. You're the next listener of The Joe Show's second annual Salute to Game Shows, Price is Right, Uncensored. A 2-part series airing on Wednesday, March 9th and Wednesday, March the 16th. We will take you back all the way to September 4th, 1972, the first day Price is Right aired on CBS. The Joe Show speaks with longtime former producer Roger Dobkowitz, $1 Million Spectacular announcer Randy West, and longtime former Price is Right legendary host Bob Barker. So mark down Wednesday, March 9th and Wednesday, March 16th, 9 p.m. Eastern, OMTimes Radio on The Joe Show.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Welcome back, everybody. We're back here on Matt Connarton Unleashed, February 11th, 2016. I'm not sure I remembered to say the date at the beginning of the show. I usually do that. I think I was too excited to just dive right in tonight because of just got done watching the debate. And actually, they wrapped up. Sometimes in a situation like this, I'll miss the very last part because I've got to get on the air. But they wrapped up at about 10 minutes of 11, so I was able to see the whole thing, including closing statements. Although typically closing and opening statements are kind of, to me, kind of a throwaway. Usually not much interesting is said there, but no, very, very interesting debate. Like I was saying before the break, I don't see myself being someone who's not a socialist. I don't see myself ever supporting Sanders, but like I said, he does say some things that I do agree with, and I mentioned some of those things, and of course, when he talks about campaign finance, he can afford to speak the truth on that in a way that no other candidate can, because of how his campaign has raised money and the way they've energized people to, I think he said the average campaign donation is $27 to his campaign, and no super PAC, no lobbyists, nobody on Wall Street's giving him any money. That's for sure. I have to say too, and this will surprise some people to hear me say this, but another thing I do like in terms of Bernie Sanders is when he discusses foreign policy, unlike the Republicans, because now that Rand Paul is out and has been out for a couple weeks now, I can't really say this about any of them necessarily, nor can I say this about Hillary Clinton. But I actually think Bernie Sanders as commander-in-chief would be reasonable and sane. And when I hear him speak about foreign policy, I don't find myself thinking, as I do find myself thinking when any of the Republicans are talking about foreign policy, or when Hillary Clinton is talking about foreign policy, because on foreign policy, I've always said Hillary Clinton essentially is a neoconservative. I think she would have been very comfortable on the foreign policy team of the George W. Bush administration, to be quite honest. And she did vote to go into Iraq and whatnot. Bernie Sanders, when he talks about foreign policy, I don't find myself thinking, oh, this guy's going to get us into World War III. I tell you what, I listened to him tonight, and it's like, he, for example, when he was speaking about regime change and the folly of regime change and how it causes long-term much bigger problems than it could solve, and he gave an example of I believe I'm always terrible on dates. 1953, I believe, was the year when the United States and Britain together orchestrated getting rid of the Shah of Iran at that time. And the disastrous long-term consequences of that decision. It's like, so he understands. It's almost like he's the only one who understands that if you understand history, then you can figure out how to avoid doing some really dumb things. Nobody else gets that. Now, I understand in the macro, part of why so few people understand this, and why, of course, there's the expression, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And, of course, the United States generally refuses to learn from history. Part of that has to do with the sort of it's psychological for our country, the sort of nationalism / jingoism that we have, where if we decide, if we were to begin to act somewhat more reasonable and not try to enforce our will in the Middle East primarily, then that would somehow mean that we were surrendering. It would somehow mean that we had weakened as a country, or that we were giving in. Now, of course, it would be smart to pull back in the Middle East, Ron Paul, when running for president, would talk a lot about blowback, which is, where we create our own problems. We cause terrorists to be created. And Rand Paul talked about that as well. But nobody else seems to get it. And I think the reason people don't get it is because it's that psychological thing where they feel like if we change strategy and become less involved, that is the same thing somehow as surrendering. That's why a lot of these people, you'll hear them say things. I've heard so many politicians utter this phrase, lamenting that the United States can't be the policeman of the world. And yet so often these people will say that, they will utter that thought, and then in the next breath, they're telling you about all these great new wars they can't wait to get us into. Well, we can't be the policeman of the world, but here's what we need to do in Syria, and here's what we need to do in Iraq, and here's what we need to do in North Korea. And, it's like, and it's, and I don't have much hope that it's ever going to change, because I think the reason Americans fall for it is because so many Americans really believe that, well, yeah, we can't be the policeman of the world, but, well, if we stop being the policeman of the world, it means we're weak, and we're just not America anymore. But Bernie Sanders, I got to be honest with you. If you look at all of the candidates that are running, he is the only one I would remotely trust with foreign policy. And to be honest, I always say the president, people have, in terms of domestic policy, people have kind of an overestimation of executive power. A lot of people tend to think of the presidency as it's almost like an emperorship where, the president just has so much power and control, much more than the president actually does, because it's just one branch of government. And, there's only so much change a president can do, because we have checks and balances and whatnot. But in terms of foreign policy, the president is the person in charge. The president is the commander in chief, and the president can do a lot of good or a lot of harm. So if I were to put aside, well, let me put it this way. If I were to put aside everything that I disagree with Bernie Sanders on in terms of what his domestic policy as president would be, higher taxes and more government, all that stuff I don't like. If I were to put all that aside and look at only foreign policy, if I had to choose between him and Hillary and the Republicans running and, gun to my head, I had to choose one of these people. I couldn't vote independent, couldn't vote libertarian, whatever. I had to choose between one of these people. I almost can't believe I'm saying this, but as I'm thinking it through, I'm realizing, yeah, I would, based on foreign policy alone, I think I would have to vote for Bernie Sanders. I kind of realized that watching the debate tonight. It was the thought was creeping into my head, and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not now endorsing Bernie Sanders for president. I don't want to confuse anybody with this. But I mean, I'm going to, I've endorsed Darrell W. Perry, and if he's, I'll probably, again, as I did in 2012, vote for whoever the Libertarian nominee is. Probably be Gary Johnson again. But if I couldn't do that, if the only choices were Bernie, Hillary, or any of these Republicans, feeling like foreign policy is the most important thing that the commander-in-chief, as commander-in-chief, has dominion over, I guess I would have to vote for Bernie. The words feel strange coming out of my mouth, but I think he really is the most sane and reasonable among them in terms of foreign policy, because he actually is not afraid to say, hey, look, we've been screwing this up and here's how, and then actually use history and specific examples from history as to how we have really botched our foreign policy. Because another part of this sort of nationalism / jingoism that exists in America, we don't like to admit that we've made mistakes. There are still people, in fact, even Vietnam, who, I think generally Americans acknowledge and have acknowledged for decades was probably not a great idea to get into that. But even that, there are people who will still say, if we had hung in there a little bit longer, we could have won the Vietnam War. We could have come out of that. We could have come out of that okay. It's astonishing. And so I think that's, again, we refuse to learn from history because there's this sort of macro psychological thing that goes on in this country where if you look at history and acknowledge that America doesn't always get it right 100% of the time, my country right or wrong, if you acknowledge that America isn't perfect, hey, Obama acknowledged that America isn't always perfect, right? He mentioned something in a speech, we're not a perfect country, we make mistakes. And because of that one moment of the Obama presidency, where he actually showed some humility on behalf of the country, that became a Republican talking point that will never go away. I hear Republicans say all the time, Obama, he goes all over the world and apologizes for America. And he goes on these apology tours, which is BS. He said one thing in a speech at the beginning of his presidency, acknowledging that America isn't always perfect. And then, but that's what happens. If you acknowledge that America isn't always perfect and that we do make mistakes, everybody freaks out. And how dare you? My country right or wrong. And so we can't learn from history because as a country, we're not grown up enough, we're not mature enough to acknowledge that sometimes we get it wrong. And tonight, on that debate stage, Bernie Sanders was the adult in the room and said, hey, guess what, guys? Sometimes we get it wrong. More Unleashed coming up. I'll be right back.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Matt Connarton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connarton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connarton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live tonight. And it was debate night from Milwaukee, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. What started out as a pretty calm, it started out calmer compared to the last one, but it got pretty heated later on, as we've been discussing. By the way, if you'd like to call in, we do have a phone line open if you watched the debate or if you want to talk about anything, really. 617-917-4476. You can call or text. Of course, we have the chat room at ipmnation.com/live1. Some quick, I love the fact checking. All of these people lie. And I do enjoy the whether it's a speech like, the State of the Union or a debate. I enjoy the fact checking. And we have also from Politico, this is becoming my new favorite website, much as I like HuffPost. Politico has up the Politico Wrong-O-Meter. They put these up after every debate, and they get them up really quick, too. It's not like you have to wait until the next day to see this. And there's great other websites, too, by the way, like politifact.org, or maybe that one's .com, politifact.com. I think factcheck.org is the other one, where they do, just nonpartisan fact-checking on all these people. But this is the one from Politico that has a handful of things from tonight's debate. So let's go through these quickly. Let's see. Clinton goes too far on Sanders' views on where Iran should deploy troops. Yeah, this was a contentious moment in tonight's debate. Let's see. Here's what Clinton said. Quote, "This is one of the areas I've disagreed with Senator Sanders on, who has called for Iranian troops trying..." Oh, yeah, by the way, my BS meter definitely went off when she was saying this. This didn't sound right to me. All right, quote, "This is one of the areas I've disagreed with Senator Sanders on, who has called for Iranian troops trying to end the civil war in Syria, which I think would be a grave mistake. Putting Iranian troops right on the border of the Golan, right next to Israel, would be a non-starter to me," unquote. I remember when she was saying this, and Sanders was kind of shaking his head like, no. Sanders has called for enlisting the help of Iran as well as other regional militaries to help end the bloodshed in Syria. In a November 11th debate, he called for, quote, "an international coalition," and that is, we have to understand that the Muslim nations in the region, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, and Jordan, all of these nations, they're going to have to get their hands dirty, their boots on the ground. They're going to have to take on ISIS, unquote. But her implication that he wants to station Iranian troops on the border of the Golan Heights, the territory Israel seized from Syria in the 1967 Middle East War, can't be supported by the record. Next one. Clinton, yeah, this is my BS meter redlined with this. Clinton minimizes her ties to the super PAC that supports her. She said, quote, "You're referring to a super PAC that we don't coordinate with, that was set up to support President Obama, that has now decided that they want to support me. It's not my PAC," unquote, said Clinton of the main super PAC supporting her candidacy, Priorities USA. Under fires from Sanders, Clinton seemed eager to suggest that she has an arm's-length relationship with the organization. While she's correct that the group began as a vehicle to support President Barack Obama's 2012 re-election bid, there is a form of indirect coordination with her campaign, and she has backed the group's fundraising efforts. Priorities is run by Clinton's 2008 field director, Guy Cecil. In addition, Clinton's current campaign chairman, John Podesta, helped restructure the group and has backed its fundraising efforts. Priorities USA raised almost $41 million last year and recently routed $1 million of its money to Correct the Record, a pro-Clinton research group run by Clinton ally David Brock. The group does coordinate with the Clinton campaign with respect to online communications. During a campaign trip to California last May, Clinton met at least twice with Priorities USA donors. Former President Bill Clinton has also appeared at fundraisers for the group. So while it may not be under candidate Clinton's control, she has granted audiences to the group's donors and has some involvement in its activities. All right, next one. Does trade destroy jobs? That's not as clear as Sanders says. Senator Bernie Sanders claimed in tonight's Democratic presidential debate that disastrous trade policies, such as the North American Free Trade Agreement and normalizing trade relations with China, have allowed, quote, corporate America to shut down in this country and throw millions of people out onto the street, unquote. Do trade deals cost millions of jobs? Whether trade deals have a direct impact on jobs at all has been a point of contention in the trade debate ever since the U.S. started cutting agreements with other countries. One of the most recent studies on the Trans-Pacific Partnership found that the trade deal could have some direct effect on U.S. jobs, albeit small. The Peterson Institute, a largely trade-supportive think tank, released a report in January that found that about 53,700 U.S. jobs could be affected each year during implementation of the agreement. To put that in perspective, about 55.5 million Americans changed jobs in 2014. The TPP would increase the annual churn by less than 0.1%, the report says. Trade critics, however, have offered more dire estimates on past trade deals. Public Citizen, a trade-skeptical group, estimates that NAFTA has led to the loss of 1 million jobs. The Economic Policy Institute in 2014 report faults a growing trade deficit with China, made worse since it joined the World Trade Organization, for the loss of 3.2 million jobs between 2001 and 2013. On immigration, which progressive senators are you remembering, Bernie? Bernie Sanders insisted that he had some of the most progressive senators by his side when he voted against a Senate 2007 immigration bill. But he might want to go back and check that 46-53 roll call again. When the Vermont Independent did indeed have 15 Democrats with him in opposition to the legislation, George W. Bush administration-backed approach that would have been the biggest change to immigration law in 20 years, they were a long way from the liberal left. In fact, among the Democratic no's were some of the most moderate members of the chamber at that time, including Max Baucus, Evan Bayh, Robert Byrd, Mary Landrieu, and Jim Webb. As for the bill's supporters, it all starts with Ted Kennedy, its chief author. But other advocates included Joe Biden, Barbara Boxer, Chris Dodd, Russ Feingold, Ted Kennedy, John Kerry, Frank Lautenberg, Patrick Leahy, Barbara Mikulski, Harry Reid, and Chuck Schumer. Oh, and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Let's see. It would be virtually impossible for Sanders to meet his prison reduction goals. Yeah, this sounded like a big stretch when he was talking about this. But here's what he said, quote, "At the end of my first term as president, we will not have more people in jail than any other country," unquote, said Bernie Sanders. Promises about the future are impossible to check exactly, but it's hard to see how this would be close to possible. Even if Sanders gave clemency to every prisoner in the federal prison system, it wouldn't be enough to knock America off its perch as the top of the world imprisonment rankings. Currently, the U.S. prison population stands at about 2.2 million, about 645,000 more than China, the world's number 2 jailer. As president, Sanders could release some of the 195,000 inmates in the Federal Bureau of Prisons or persuade Congress to pass sentencing bills related to the population. But 9 out of 10 American prisoners are in state or local lockup, meaning that it's up to state legislatures to really change the system of mass incarceration in the United States. Sanders and Clinton agree with Obama, not to mention criminal justice reform advocates on the right, about the need to end the so-called pipeline to prison. Broken communities, education disparities, and other broader social problems create a funnel that sends the poor and minorities toward crime and incarceration, the argument goes. Fixing this is a central part of Sanders' campaign pledge, but even if he's successful, it won't have much impact on the generations currently cycling through American prisons during the first 4 years. Let's see, a few more. The unarmed man Clinton mentioned was armed. In a discussion of social justice issues, Hillary Clinton said, quote, "We know of the tragic, terrible event that led to the death of Dontre Hamilton right here in Milwaukee, a young man, unarmed, who should still be with us," unquote. Hamilton, 31, wasn't carrying any weapon with him when he and a police officer got into a scuffle in April 2014. However, Officer Christopher Manny claimed Hamilton grabbed his police baton and struck him on the neck with it. A state investigation found many witnesses saw Hamilton, who family members had long suffered mental and emotional problems, raised a baton or a similar tube-like object during the altercation. Hamilton was shot and killed by Manny during the encounter, which was criticized as excessive use of force. The officer fired 14 times. No federal charges were filed against the officer, but he was fired for violating city policy on pat-down encounters. Let's see. Last one. Wait, was Hillary Care really the first Obamacare? Quote, before it was called Obamacare, it was called Hillary Care, unquote, said Hillary Clinton, taking a line she's begun to use in her campaign. Clinton is right in pointing out that her husband's administration proposed a comprehensive health reform law, which was derisively dubbed Hillary Care and failed. It had some features in common with the Affordable Care Act enacted more than 15 years later, but they were by no means identical. Clinton's plan would have required most Americans to switch to a new system. Obama kept much of the employer-based healthcare system intact. Obama also adopted some key ideas, including the individual mandate that had originally been favored by Republicans in the first Bush administration. So there you have it. That's some of the fact-checking. I'm sure by tomorrow on sites like factcheck.org and PolitiFact, we'll have something more exhaustive. So maybe we'll get to look at that a little bit deeper tomorrow night on the show. But when we come back, because we are up against another break, but there's an interesting article up on HuffPost. Donald Trump and the GOP's 40% nightmare. The real estate mogul could cruise along under 40% and still win or force a brokered convention. By the way, Harry Reid speculated that the Democrats could also be facing a brokered convention. This is a nightmare for either party to have to go through, but I'll tell you what, it would be fascinating to watch. So I'm hoping for a couple of brokered conventions. I think it would be great to see a floor fight. I mean, it's happened before, but not since the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, both the parties have kind of streamlined the whole nominating process over the years in terms of how that goes anyway. So we'll see. Exciting stuff. Don't go away. More Unleashed. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. We are live on IPM Nation 1 and OTR FM on this very cold night here in New Hampshire where we are. Stay with us.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Healing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Healing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Welcome back, Matt Connarton Unleashed. As we cruise into our final segment tonight. Don't forget, you can hear the show live 5 nights a week on the IPM Nation live station on Live 1 from the Uptown Auto Repair studio. And, of course, powered by Ambit Energy. and find out more, go to ipmnation.com/ambit-rabbit. That's what happens when I talk too fast. Ambit Rabbit. ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. That's what I was trying to get out, and find out how you can save on your energy bills. And, of course, Tuesdays and Thursday nights, we're also on OTR FM. So hello to all of you listening on the premium channel on the OMTimes Radio Network. And don't forget, this week's television edition is up with the sort of the postmortem on the primary, the New Hampshire primary specifically, with myself and John Hopwood and Peter White. And I want to, a couple things before we wrap up. We have to get to Trump. It can't be a Trump-less show. By the way, Trump's name was mentioned a few times tonight I don't think Hillary mentioned Donald Trump ever tonight. It was Bernie Sanders who mentioned Trump several times. But let me read this quickly from HuffPost about the 40% issue with Donald Trump in terms of getting to the nomination. It says here, Donald Trump won New Hampshire with 35% of the vote on Tuesday, solidifying his place as the front runner for the Republican 2016 presidential nomination when the party meets for its national convention in Ohio this summer. But Cleveland, we have a problem. Hitting 35% is terrific in baseball. In politics, it's still 16 points shy of a victory, and neither Trump nor any other Republican has shown any signs of doing any better than 40% in any individual contest. It's the sort of implausible scenario journalists like to speculate about every 4 years, but there hasn't actually been a so-called brokered convention since 1952, when Adlai Stevenson got the Democratic nod on the third ballot. Indeed, most political observers have been predicting the GOP field will narrow after the early tests, keeping the trend going. But the New Hampshire results may have actually raised the prospect that Trump will keep trucking along, getting under 40% of voter support, and no one else will get enough to dethrone him. Here's why. The GOP establishment, which is strongly opposed to Trump and Senator Ted Cruz because of fears about their electability, has been hoping for a more mainstream candidate to emerge. For a moment, that looked like Senator Marco Rubio, who had unexpectedly strong showing in Iowa. But he stumbled in the Granite State after his robotic debate performance and finished fifth, right behind the other Floridian hope, former Governor Jeb Bush. Grabbing the non-Trump nomination and finishing second was Ohio Governor John Kasich, but he only notched 16%, not that far ahead of Cruz's 12% or Bush and Rubio at 11%. It all adds up to something of a nightmare for the Republican Party. In order to topple Trump, they need one candidate to rally around. Iowa and New Hampshire have left them with at least three, none of whom has a reason to drop out before March 15th, when the contests start getting much larger and more mainstream. Said a GOP consultant and Fox News commentator Ed Rollins, quote, "Two things are very real. Donald Trump is not going away. You're not going to kick him out early. And there's not going to be an establishment candidate who can move quickly," unquote. Bush is best positioned in terms of resources, but he's trailed in the polls. Rubio has less money, but Rollins estimated he could raise it. Kasich is practically broke after betting everything on New Hampshire, but he could capitalize on his momentum there. And if he can survive until March 15th, he'll get a shot in the winner-take-all contest in his home state of Ohio. Florida is winner-take-all the same day, but both Floridians have been trailing Trump at home. There's more to this article. I don't want to read the whole thing because it does kind of break this down further, but it would be very interesting because, you know, even if Trump clearly is the nominee, there was something that floated a couple of months ago about Reince Priebus coming up with a plan to steal the nomination away from Trump by creating more superdelegates, et cetera. Meanwhile, in South Carolina, because that's the next big primary, South Carolina, I know we have the Nevada caucus before then, but the caucuses are a joke and a circus as far as I'm concerned. But it's going to get very nasty in South Carolina, as it always does. One of the classic examples of how nasty politics gets in South Carolina, in the year 2000, I'll never forget this, when it was George W. Bush fighting it out with John McCain for the Republican nomination. And in South Carolina, and Karl Rove, a real scumbag for doing this, but they had spread a rumor in order to take out McCain, because McCain was definitely a threat to be possibly the Republican nominee in 2000. In order to take him out, it wasn't spoken about in speeches or anything, certainly, but there was sort of a whisper campaign going on. Karl Rove and the campaign had spread this rumor that McCain had actually fathered a child out of wedlock with an African-American woman from South Carolina, and that he had a black baby in South Carolina. And it wasn't true, and it was debunked, but the rumor spread, and people turned against him, and George W. Bush won South Carolina, and that put him on the path toward winning ultimately the nomination. Well, and ultimately the presidency, unfortunately. So South Carolina can get pretty nasty. What's going on there now, and I just saw this pop up, this is from Politico. It says, Cruz and Glenn Beck are ripping Trump on abortion and gay marriage in South Carolina. Ted Cruz and Glenn Beck unleashed a barrage of criticisms of Donald Trump on religion and social issues here, angling for support from voters in one of the most conservative parts of the state. At the massive Morning Star Fellowship Church, Cruz laced into Trump as weak on abortion, gay marriage, and gun rights, while Beck suggested Trump has never cracked open a Bible. He's probably right. Beck said, quote, "Too many people right now are looking at a guy like Donald Trump and believing that man has ever opened a Bible. That's the biggest crock of bull crap I've ever heard. We all know it," unquote. Even Cruz, who tries to whack Trump consistently but more subtly, got in on the attack on Trump's faith, mocking him for stumbling over a famous passage. Cruz said, quote, "2 Corinthians walked into a bar. I'm sorry, that was mean. I shouldn't have done that," unquote. But the crowd ate it up. By the way, for those who don't know the reference, so Trump was referring to the book in the Bible, 2 Corinthians, and kept calling it 2 Corinthians in a speech where he was trying to fake his way through, appearing religious. But the crowd ate it up, and as Trump campaigned in Louisiana, despite the looming South Carolina primary, Cruz repeatedly cast him and Marco Rubio as weak on gay marriage, accusing them of surrender in front of a standing room crowd that Cruz claimed neared 2,500. "They're liberals," one woman shouted. No one corrected her. By the way, that, of course, that is the thing in the modern Republican Party. If you're not a right-wing extremist on absolutely everything 100% of the time, someone will call you a liberal. John Kasich went to a gay wedding, so, he's accused of being a liberal. Jeb Bush supports a path to citizenship, so he is therefore a liberal. If you look at the voting records of these people historically, they're not liberals by any stretch. They're conservatives who happen to not agree with every extreme right-wing position that conservatives believe. But, you step out of line on anything, and, you're a liberal or a rhino. Let's see. And for the second day in a row, Cruz lit into Trump repeatedly as soft on nearly every issue that animates the most conservative voters. As Cruz touted his work as Solicitor General on anti-abortion issues, he accused Trump of, quote, "having never stood before and defended the right to life. If a candidate has spent 60 years of his life describing himself as very, very pro-choice, if a candidate has defended partial birth abortion for most of his adult life, we should not be surprised if, as president, he will not defend the right to life," unquote, Cruz said. In remarks to reporters and to voters, Cruz again said that Trump is intent on expanding Obamacare and growing government with free giveaways. Cruz at times tried not to say Trump's name, but the crowd often filled in the blanks. "It was Trump," yelled one man. "It could have been that guy," Cruz said with a knowing smile. Or it could have been that guy. But Beck was even more harsh in warming up the crowd. Quote, "Donald Trump is very dangerous. If South Carolina makes Donald Trump a winner, we're done," unquote. So that's the tone and tenor of it. But By the way, speaking of the abortion thing specifically, I do recall a while ago finding this was back around during 2012 when Trump was flirting with the idea of running for president, but ended up deciding, hey, Romney's running. He's a good guy. We're all set. He was being interviewed by Howard Stern, and Stern was saying to him pretty directly, look, you're talking all pro-life all of a sudden, but come on, I know you. I know that if I were to talk to you privately, nobody else around, no microphones, and I asked you, what do you really think about abortion? Yeah, I know you don't really care about abortion. And Trump just kind of evaded the question. But, I don't believe that I don't believe Trump is pro-life or look, I mean, as recently as a few years ago, there's video and audio of Trump saying that, he largely identified as being a Democrat and whatnot. He's just, he's playing all of you. He's saying what he thinks you want to hear. And then once he's the nominee, he'll say whatever he thinks he needs to say to win the election. If he even really wants to be president. This might just all be just a bored rich guy who thought it would be fun to run and is surprised at how well he's doing. That is possible. It's funny. You look at the two nominees. I'm not nominees. Wow. I'm projecting way ahead. The two winners of the New Hampshire primary, Trump and Bernie. And it's like, 6 months ago, who would have seriously believed that those would be the two winners of the New Hampshire primary? And I suspect in both of their cases, on some level, neither of them expected to be doing as well as they are. I certainly don't think that when Bernie Sanders got into the race, he honestly believed that he had a shot at being the Democratic nominee. I think he just wanted to do it because he had some issues that he wanted to push to the forefront. I would venture to guess that probably no one is more surprised than he is at how well he's doing. And I kind of wonder that about Trump, too. It's possible. We're out of time. We'll be back tomorrow night exclusively on IPM Nation 1 for the Friday night edition of Unleashed. So I will talk at you all then. Good night, everybody.